Hello, I'm Sarah Vinci, and I am the mission director at First Reformed Church. We're here today, and I have Alina Vlasenko. Alina is one of the refugees that our church helped sponsor to get here. I wanted to bring her in because I think often we can talk about Ukraine and what's happening around the world. We can talk about refugees, but sometimes we don't take the time to just sit and listen and understand. It's a concept that many of us can't really wrap our brains around. And I would say that probably for Alina, a year and a half ago, you wouldn't have been able to either. Like when you think about where you were pre-war, like being able to understand is a really hard thing unless you've walked through it. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to share some of their stories to help give us a little perspective. And then hopefully moving forward, we'll be able to figure out how we can partner better with Ukraine, how we can partner better with refugees in our own area, and how we can be praying. I will say that this conversation is probably not for younger children. And so if you have younger children around, we just ask that you use your discretion, because we may talk about things that are very vulnerable and disturbing, and they should be disturbing. But I wanted to give her a place to be able to safely tell their story, so that as we enter into relationship with more refugees, that we can hopefully come with an empathetic heart and a humble heart.
Sure.
So, Alina, we have, since Christmas Day, our relationship started like the week before. And I can remember it was pretty instant. Like once I saw you, it just felt very natural and normal. And I think that part of that is just the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thankful for that. But through that time, I've watched as you've reconciled the two worlds, or tried to, between, and still in the process of reconciling the two worlds of what war-torn areas and what living here, like how do you do that? And you still have quite a bit of family in Ukraine. So can we start back at the beginning, what life looked like for you before the war? Let's start just even like 3 days before, what was happening.
I may start with 3 years before.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to share, because I know this is our life experience and it's very different from everybody else, but just something is in common for every Ukrainian. What is in common, definitely, that we lived normal life before, but normal was different also for everybody. And then the war started, which actually started 2014, but then more massive war all over the country. It would start February 24, 2022. So 3 years before that, I had my first child being born. Then, since my second child, I was pregnant with, I started I call them trips from hospital to hospital, because I had some nose issues. And that was kind of the beginning of our war of the family, dealing with these health issues. And so why do I start so far? Because for me, it was the moment how God showed us mercy right before the war. Mm-hmm. So for 3 years, we lived in a city named Poltava. This is the city we were born. My family is there. My parents, we grew up, both me and Zhenya, there. Our kids were born there. So there we lived all our life. And then apparently we had a desire from the Lord 5 months before the war started to move to the capital city of Ukraine, Kiev, but it's not Kiev itself. It's like suburb, but very nice, modern and family-oriented city, Irpin. We wanted to start kind of growing there in all senses. Like our kids would go to Christian school. The friend of mine is ruling that school, and it's really nice place for kids to grow. They were teeny tiny, so I want them to be taught proper things since they are young. We wanted also to grow with Zhenya socially, and so we wanted to change the surrounding that will help us to grow. And as we started this new life there in October 2021, and I still was dealing with my health issues, so in December, it was right before New Year, we decided that let's do the surgery to fix that. And so the doctor I would find that time was in Mariupol. This is the city which is on the eastern south of Ukraine. And that time nobody even thought about the war or something. So I went there in January, which was 1 month before the war. And I had that surgery in the hospital, and the doctor fixed my problem. I went back home, being kind of weak, but ready to start a new life, I would say. And kids were already in preschool. They loved that preschool. We loved it because it's kind of the best of the best, I would say, for us. Was the church in that city, Irpin, is very great in perspective of how they serve socially to the people, how they minister to the locals, to each other, just how they run a church or how they do the church. They are a church, so they just don't do things or activities. So we loved being there. We found a good apartment there. Finally, it was a long journey to find it, but this is how we started New Year, I would say, 2022. Having apartment, having good church, having good preschool, and so having me and you, fixed one with nose, and I still was kind of weak, but different perspective for future. Like there is hope, that hope with no sickness, being fixed at least, hope for kids to grow in good surrounding, hope for a new life to start. Zhenya was going to start the training for his new job. And so with these kind of expectations, February 24 morning, we woke up, and just in the morning, it was 7 something, because we were getting ready for preschool. Me and kids, we were dressing up, and Zhenya would open his phone, and he just says these words, which I think everybody would hear that morning in Ukraine: the war has started. And for us, it was, it's not something we were ready to hear. And at the same time, somehow we would think about that beforehand, because some rumors were already there. But we would never think it would happen all over the Ukraine. So what we've learned that morning, that rocket missiles were in most cities of Ukraine, big cities, and it's all over the country. While we would think that maybe it's only east, as it was before, but more severe fightings or something. But just here, we didn't realize, I would say, the reality at first. It was shock. It was just not knowing what to do first, and just frustration. And so our reaction was, instead of maybe to escape or run, like to take the car and drive somewhere to the west, we decided to stay. And how did we know about the war? Because the preschool sent us text message like, no preschool for today because of the situation in the country. And that's how we got to know what kind of the situation is now. And that morning we just decided to go for a walk with kids, because we didn't realize what does it mean, like the war itself. I remember my granddad would tell me the stories about the Second World War, and I would listen to those stories, but they never were kind of real to me. They would real because he would share with me. But this time the same, like I would hear this word war, not knowing what does it mean, even to our family, to our kids. So we would go for a walk. I remember just we went outside, and there would be already planes coming. And for me, we even didn't realize whose plane are those, like Russians or Ukrainians. So what I taught my kids, I remember clearly, I would pretend it's as a game. So I say like, oh, the planes are coming, let's hide. So we would hide in the parking lot or parking space down cellars. There is a big parking place near our house and concrete one. So kind of safe, I thought, to hide. And we would teach kids how to hide from the planes. So when the plane is coming, they have 5 seconds to go there. And they had kind of fun, but just for me, it was like, are those Russians, Ukrainians? And we didn't know how close the fightings were. Just what we knew. Rockets are all over the country, and here I see the planes. So my idea and Zhenya's idea was to fill the tank. We had it half full, just to the top, just in case. And so we took our kids and we went to the nearest gas station. And on the way to the gas station, we would see all those planes. We didn't know where they go to. But on the way to the gas station, we would stop long time before far away from the gas station because the line was huge. And we realized like today we won't fill the tank. The line was terribly huge, like it's across the whole city almost. But that helped us to see the huge explosion fume from the nearest Gostomel airport. And that was a military kind of object they would try to destroy, and fightings were there. And we didn't know that. That's where the planes would go. And so because we saw that explosion, and that helped us to realize that this is something very close. Like, we didn't know the army was there, but just at least like danger is close. As close that we decided, no, we have to maybe run. So we went back home. We stayed home, just turned on all the news, called the families, and just getting to know how things are in different cities, because we were here. Parents would be in Poltava. Some brothers of Zhenya would be in the other cities, just to check up with everybody how they are, and to realize like what should be next, like what step to take. It was kind of long and hard decision, maybe one of the hardest in life, whether to stay in the city or to go, if to go, to go where and how. So this was like, and fast, because you have to react fast, and as slow as it could be. And that was the moment we decided we will try to go somewhere to the west maybe. But then the other question we have the car, which has one extra seat, 2 boys' seats, and we are in front. But at the same time, we have 3 more people we would think in Kiev, which is my sister, the girl from our church, and the guy. I knew that nobody maybe would take them, and also Zhenya's brother was there, so we would type them and call them and just check with them, like, what are your plans? Like, would you like to live with us? If you would like, we would just take the car seats out and just take kids on lap and take you in case you would like, but just it should be very fast reaction. And we didn't, like, Zhenya was not sure whether it's possible to enter Kiev city, because we knew that Kiev is also missiled. And there is a short way to the highway we should actually take. But instead of that, people would reply like, yes, we would love to go with you. And then we needed to take them from Kiev. But Zhenya was not sure, like, is it possible to enter the city? I'm like, I would never, ever forgive myself if we would not try to take them. So we would take that direction first. And then on the way to Kiev, we saw the tanks coming, the like column. And also, like, I didn't know, I shared with you, like, are they Ukrainians or Russians? So I would try to think whom to cover first. Zhenya is not sure, like, whether we will try to get into Kiev. And in Kiev, there was no transportation system working. Like, the metro would stop, the subway, the buses would stop. Only taxi might go, but just they had huge line of those who were waiting for them. And my sister and Tanya, the other girl named, they live the opposite side of the city. So for us, it was a question how to take them to this line or road, which leads, Zhytomyrskas, we call it, leads to the west. Yeah, so we decided to go to Kiev, and on the way to Kiev, we just tried to figure out whether they will be in time, these people, to be in time to sit in the car, because we would stay in a huge traffic jam, and there is like no way to go right or left, so we would just do 1 meter by 1 meter every like hour. Sometimes it took us 7 hours to get out of the city, just a little teeny tiny distance. But just because of the huge traffic jam, everybody would stay in that line. And it also gave time for Tanya and Sonia and Vlad to come to us. And they were right in time when we were out of this, the way out, they would come. So we were happy to have them with us. And we would go towards Tomr, somewhere to the west, and all this picture, this was kind of like not a good dream, I mean, but horror movie or fighting movie. I would seen it only in movies, how the soldiers, militaries, army would, like tanks would come, the roadsides would be filled with hidden tanks, only you see these cannons. And for us, it was also the picture not very clear, like the planes are coming. Will we be able to escape? Like, will we be not bombed there? And the same time, should we stay? Should we go? Then we would have all these people with us, and we would pretend for kids again as a game, like, oh, look, the soldier is coming, he has gone. For boys, it's like, boys are boys. They are like, tanks are coming. And they were kind of happy, but they would feel the stress we had. And so this is how we made it out of the city. Later on, we found out that the short way we should take to the highway, the fightings would go on there, and people from European would not be able to escape from the city. The bridge we took to Kiev would be not the bridge in European would be destroyed. The cars would be shoot, every single one in a row, just with civilians, like families like us would take kids, would take elderly people, would take just whoever, like neighbors maybe, just not army, like not military people, would sit inside just trying to get out of the city, and the Russians would come and kill and shoot directly, like every single car. Or they would, for fun, like with tanks, go over the car with an elderly man in it. So some weird, cruel things will be done later on. And so we realized we were in time to get out of this situation. And what we did, we went to the west of Ukraine. We stayed for 5 days near Lviv. And then we moved towards, Zhenya's brother lives in west, and also we knew pastors there from the church, New Life Church, and they ministered us and lots of refugees. Like they would minister from 100 to 150 refugees daily, like feeding, finding hosting, giving them basic things needed, like blankets, warm clothing. It was winter time. So we would take only one suitcase with us, which was like very quickly brought some basic clothing. What we did have, we had a backpack already packed beforehand. Because of those rumors, we would always think that maybe we won't have access to food, like maybe stores will be not working or something. So we would buy food ahead of hands and basics like hygiene stuff, candles, matches, just in case we need to go to the cellar downstairs. But so that's what we had already packed, and plus we took some basic like documents and clothing, and this is how we arrived to West. And that church, they were, I would say, armed, who would embraced and hugged all those who would come. We had lots of people came there from Kharkiv and Izium, and some of them from Mariupol, not many from actually central Ukraine as we were, but just most of them would be from eastern parts. And they, till now, they are ministering to those people. They provide food. They now think about how to even provide more opportunities for jobs, for feeding, like they would create warm housing since this spring. So these are like their vision, how to feed more, not only locally, like refugees, they minister there too, because they have many refugees who would come and go further, come and or go back, or go, like we call them a port city, like the city who never have the permanent, permanent people to stay. So the same was with us. We would stay there, and as long as we would stay, they would help us with anything they could. And we were happy to also be able to minister with our friends to this church, and to the east we would bring the humanitarian vans later on. So this is like a common common synergy of whoever would come there, whatever we can help with, we would help. Who is helping us, we would help that church, and then to the east, the help would be brought. So it's like we would try to figure out any way possible how we can send help to the eastern cities, which were later on, like Mariupol, for example, destroyed totally, and people would stay with no electricity, no food, no stores working, no pharmacies. So whatever we could do, we would order from whether Hungary, people would come and bring the friends of ours, or anybody. We would gather donations and send for the equipment for the army or clothing, or it was every single day rotation of things and needs and help. But talking about the whole 10-month period we stayed in Ukraine, it was you never know what to expect next. You never know what news you will wake up with, and whether you will wake up, actually, whether your family will wake up. So every day it's like, how are you? Are you safe? And with kids, they would feel all that stress, so they would misbehave tremendously. Like the very first 2 months, it was crazy. We would never think, like we pretend, we try to create these kind of safe talks around them, but still they would go later on to the preschool, they would hang out with other kids. They knew a lot, and with their age of 2 and 3 that time, they would know much more than I would know in 2 and 3 age period. So this is basically the very first experience we had, and the very first day, how was it? Then later on, my sister, she lives in Kremenchuk, so she would also take her kids. Her husband stayed at the place in Kremenchuk, and he would minister to refugees there locally with church and seminar. He's a pastor and dean there. But Oksana, she would take her kids to Poland first. They would go there for a month. One of the hard things for Ukrainian families is to be separated and to be divided. So they would stay there for a month, and they will be back with kids to Kremenchuk, to their father and husband, because of this separation. Like, it's too long period, and they decided to be back. And as soon as they were back, the mall near their house, which is 200 meters from them, it was rocket missile with just civilians being there. There is no military object or any reason to do that. So it was done just a terrorism in its clear, obvious way. And Oksana would be with girls right near, because they live 200 meters, and I was not sure they are home, but they were like on the bus stop nearby. So they would see that, they would feel that rocket, we call it wave, after the hit. And I called her like, Oksana, please come to us, because we were not sure that day whether they tried to destroy the railway there, or they tried to destroy just for fun, as we call it, like for dumb reason, the civilian object, or maybe they will try to destroy any manufacturing there, because many plants are there. Kremenchuk is a very productive city. We didn't know anything what's next. Like, we knew that the rocket hit, and we didn't know whether the other one will come or more. They sometimes have a series of rocket missiles. So we begged them to come to us, and they decided, like, she takes kids and come to West and stay with us for a month. Then they would stay with us, her and 2 daughters. And also within a month, it's kind of hard to be separated from father. They decided to be back. So now they are again there. Kremenchuk is still bombed pretty often, or drones would come to the city. So family is scattered, but still, war is still there.
Yeah, I think a couple things, as we've talked and looked at pictures that were really striking to me. Just a couple days before war started, you have pictures of your kids and grandparents walking down the street together, going to the park. And, we don't have a context for understanding how much your life got flipped around. A couple events that I think people can kind of hook their hat on or understand. 9/11, it's something Americans, like older Americans, when you say 9/11, people can remember exactly where they were. and that feeling of like, what's happening? Like, I have no control over what's happening in my country. But that was like one day, one moment. And to live in that reality of what's happening, where is it going to hit, what's going to happen for a year, is really hard for our brains to imagine. And then the other one that I think we can semi-relate would be COVID. There were rumors of this illness and whatever, and just for your life to change. But I think the reality of just trying to decide, what do I take, what don't I take, where do I go, where don't I go? If I go that way, that could be where I'm stopped. If I go this way, and just relying heavily on God, what do you want our family to do? And then trusting that. And I think you're still in that place, right? Like you talked about how when God sent you the longer way, that you felt like it was God's protection over you, that you could clearly see. Also the place that you had your surgery. It was, I remember seeing on our news, that particular hospital was the one that had gotten bombed. They were one of the very first that had gotten bombed, and you were there just a few weeks prior to that. And so I think that you give testimony of how you've seen God, but there have been times where you're like, God, where are you? And you walked into this war with faith. And the thing that I found interesting the other night was you were talking about some people who walked into the war without faith, but how they actually are starting to say, tell me about God.
It's just whenever you face people who before considered themselves to be non-Christians, or like they knew nothing about God, I think the war is the moment where most of people cannot stay unbelievers anymore. Like you have to have hope, and you do not have hope. You have to hold on something, and you do not have anything to hold on. And that's how the only hope we had, and the only thing we would hold on, it's Jesus and his word, his promise. And for us, it was also challenged. I won't say like for Christians, it was easy to face the war because Jesus is with us. He is with us. But at the same time, it was so hard to face the very first shock moment. Because when you pray, you see that people are still dying. When you pray, you see that rockets are still destroying. When you pray and you see that things are going crazy, like no order coming, instead of like you pray and you see the result. But the thing you learn through that, you learn through the whole period of war, that the only hope which is left, that God is ruling the history, even with the war happening, which is evil and not from him. Like he hates the war the same as you hate to see the result of evil, which you cannot see anymore. Because there was time, I remember it was maybe 3 months or 2 months after the war. It was when Irpin, I would not be now clear with dates, but when the city, we saw the deoccupation truth, how the city would look after the occupation. It was much worse than the occupation itself. The fact we knew that the city is occupied, that city is destroyed, buildings, I mean. But when you see those results of the cruelness of soldiers and Russians who would come into the city, what they would do to kids when they rape tiny babies, when they would kill children in front of mom's eyes, or dad would be tortured in front of kid eyes. And then you learn to know all those stories. You see all those pictures, how they would kill people. It's not just shoot people. It would be like tied hands beside back or something. And then you look at that and your dumb question is like, Lord, how long? Can you intervene this cruelness and craziness of evil in its pure evidence? And I wish it would happen like in the Old Testament, when the miracles would come and it will be stopped in a minute. And I remember me praying and believing that maybe Russian's army will hear the sounds and they will flee, or Russian soldiers will kill each other. Sometimes it happened with in the Old Testament. So we had these kind of still hopes, and at the same time we realized like God is still in control. But at the same time we pray, and it seems like you see more craziness of cruelness, of evil, and then you as a Christian doubt your faith, or your prayer is facing weakness, kind of like you feel like it has no power. Before you were a warrior, mighty to stop in spiritual world, to fight in physical, you would see the result of your prayer. And here, the only thing I would see that we become stronger as a church, all national wide, we would stop having church in perspective of buildings and walls. We would start having church with no boundaries, helping each other, not knowing each other. No denominations matter anymore. Like voluntarily, we would help anybody who is even Orthodox, Catholic, any denomination, which is kind of even, it doesn't matter, believer, unbeliever, as long as you are volunteering, you help people, you care for people, you feed people, you send warm clothing, blankets, hygiene stuff to people. And that's how when the church would do, especially like European church, I will tell more specifically, or Poltava church, they will go to East and they will help locally for those who lost their homes. The whole city, like 80% would have no conditions to live in their apartments or houses. So they would come to church, and the church will provide anything like medicine, even for animals, help. Or so this is what church would do. They will meet the needs for basic levels or any like counseling, talking. And that's how for unbelievers, those who never been to church became more a safe place to come. Before they would kind of maybe afraid to come to the church, or church would be an organization for them. Now this is not organization anymore. This is the people who would meet the needs, who would help with basics. So what unbelievers would have, I can tell you like 10 stories, 12, dozen stories, right? Like how unbelievers would say that we are thankful to the church because the church evacuated us, fed us, gave us clothing, provided counseling. Because before, when we heard the story about church, it was more like religious organization. We would hear from historical lessons or from, I don't know, like in university course or from a side. But now we meet the church person to person, and we see how this God alive helps them to go through these trials. It's nothing about God is not taking them out of trials, but God leads them through the trials with this hope and joy we cannot understand. Like what type of calmness do you have in the midst of mass? And what type of hope you offer me, I can find refuge in. So when we say Jesus is the only hope in this mass, that means that this is actually the only hope. Like I remember the first day when you leave everything, you leave your family, you leave your possession, you leave your friends, you leave your location, you leave your life, and you go with anything, mostly like basic stuff, to nowhere. What do you have with you? And this was first check I had in my faith, the real check, what stays with me when I have nothing and nobody. Because before you used to be in ministry, you used to be around people, you used to be around friends and family. And now when you cannot minister to nobody, when you cannot talk to your family anymore, when you cannot do basic things you used to do, like go to work, go to preschool, you stay there at the West and you just in the middle of the night ask yourself, who am I now? I used to be a teacher. I used to be a, for example, sister to brothers and sisters, or a minister to youth. I used to be daughter for my parents. I used to be mom for my kids. I used to be wife. I used to be whoever. Now I'm not anymore. But the question is, who am I now? So this was a very good check, I guess, for most of Christians that time, like whether you stay with God and this gives you hope, this gives you life, and then you can provide or advise or offer this hope to hopeless people, or you need help. Because there was time I needed hope to be refound. I needed foundation to be reestablished for my inner world. So I would say unbelievers would meet that time and now and every single day the real Christianity, not in words, but just in actions. As Jesus, he would be with people and provide the love.
Yeah, it brings that verse, when you are weak, I am strong. That when you can do nothing else, then you see God showing up.
But the most maybe miraculous, obvious evidence of Christianity would be when Christians would sacrifice or risk their life for the sake of others. For example, evacuating people, or come into the areas which are not safe, bring in the food. This is what vans with humanitarian aims would do. And then the question people would say, like, why do you come to me? Why do you come for so long? Because I'm the only person living in this area, but you would still go through the bullets. And this is, I think, the love Christ was talking about. And at the same time, it's always hard because lots of doubts we still have, like, what is best to do in this particular moment? Is it right choice you have done? Or is it wrong choice you have done according to, you have lots of reasons why do you do what you do. Like, for example, in our case, we had 2 surgeries. One is right before the war, the other was right after the war, kind of later, in June. And then 2 little kids, and then my health issue. And for us still was doubt, like whether it's good thing to be away from the city we stayed before, or just to help church to evacuate people, and Jenny would stay, or for me and kids would stay, and lots of doubts you have every single day. Now the family stayed there. It's the same question, like, should I stay in the country and help? Should I try to find help somewhere else? Should I? And those questions are not easy questions, and the answers are not answer you find and you are like, oh no, I'm calm, I found the answer. So being here is not easy. We still live 2 lives. We still, I would say, cry through the nights, live through the days, because kids need to grow up, and family back home still is not safe. Country back home is still fighting. Army is still, and not only army, civilians are still dying. And that's why whatever we can do, we want to do, being here. So this is the moment we are now.
Yeah, I think that it's important, one, for us to be able to glimpse into what war really looks like, even though we still won't understand. So that we can be better advocates, so that we can be Christ-like, so that when people find themselves at their weakest, that we can come alongside. And so, my hope with this podcast is that people can start to understand. So when they meet you and you greet them with a smile, that they can understand there's so many layers to, you do have joy in Christ, but you are in pain of the ashes that you're watching around you.
And every day is different. Like every morning, news are different, and back home situation is different. And for me, I remember this moment at the war when people wrote me, like texted me the very first couple of days, we are praying for you. And I knew that this was my first time in life when I felt prayers. So when people say like, how are you here? It's a hard question for us to hear, because we never can say like, we're fine. Even we are fine this moment, the next moment we won't be fine learning something happened at home. But what we do appreciate, these are things helped us back in the beginning of the war and during all those 10 months. Any act of love with real help felt, like when people would bring food, we would share with the Eastern people who are in need. When people would donate, when we can buy stuff, like basic stuff for people in need there who are without, for example, electricity, the generators, or without heating system, the heaters, or gloves for the military for winter, anything like shoes, medicaments. So now the things which are really welcomed when people are praying, we do know that prayer has protection and power. So we do appreciate when people say, I'm praying for you, and they stand in spiritual war, because we are physically not there, but we know God is mighty to save. And also we do welcome any type of help we can provide for Ukraine, because this is where our heart is, and what we try to do every single day, like to ask basic needs they have. And not only family, we now have 5 churches we cooperate with and help with them coming to East, bringing help or serving refugees at the places, which are Poltava, Kremenchuk, Tyachiv, Ruski Pole churches, and Irpin churches. 5 of them, we know people from there, we know pastors from there. And also, this is like, this is the most miraculous thing happened, that Church of God, the family of God, became international, became unique and united. So, and I do believe it goes on more and more as long as believers respond the need. Mm-hmm. Because as we were talking about, Jesus would be there, and he would meet the need physically, and then he preached the gospel. And that's what we help to do there, meet the needs and preach the gospel.
Yeah. So I think the goal of this time was just so people could get a glimpse, and then hopefully going forward we can have more conversations about how can we partner well, mm-hmm. and more stories of like, what does it mean for the global church to partner across the ocean, mm-hmm. When we can't physically be there? How can we be more of a global church to our brothers and sisters? So thank you for coming and sharing some of your hardest, most vulnerable times of where God was sifting your faith. And thank you for being a blessing to our church and bringing us very tangible ways that we can be praying for you as a family, but for Ukraine as a whole.
I would like to add maybe like thank word to the church here, because you stand with Ukraine even you are not there. You help Ukraine even you are not there. And we do believe that this is how God's family works. Like, you have arms being reached so far, not physically being there, but having these fingerprints on every meal we send there, or every stuff we buy there to help people in need. So just for you to know that you are there with all your help provided, and also with help that you provided to our family coming here, staying here, and even now, we would let you know that we have this army of angels who are ministering to Ukrainian nation. And thank you for joining this army and being our angels here so far, but so close. So thank everyone who are with us.
Alina.
Thank you.